the king is coming to ask and understand the concept of the Jewish people. Finally, he's in touch with the rabbi. He's finally getting to the source. The Christians pointed back on that everything that happened to the Jews is real, but then it was replaced. The Muslims came along and said everything that happened with the Jews is real, and then it was replaced. The final prophet came and cut everyone off, and everyone else is not significant besides the final prophet Muhammad. And the king is a smart thinking person, and he says, wait, what do you mean it just ended? Who said it ended? So you're both, the big religions are pointing back to the Jew and saying the Jew is the truth. So let me call the Jew. And the king, it's very hard for him to accept the fact that God communicates with people, that God sees what you're doing, cares what you're doing, and is telling you what to do. Because he had a dream, and in the dream, when he was sacrificing, he was told, God wants your intentions, he's happy with your intentions, doesn't want your actions. Is there really such a thing that God wants your actions, there's such a thing as actions that God wants? This is very hard for the king to accept. And then the rabbi begins by opening him up to very deep concepts, but slowly building up a foundation to be able to understand what the Jewish people are about, what the mission of the Jewish people is, what the Torah is all about. And the way he does it is by gradually giving him stories that he can relate to. By explaining the king, we spoke about the king in India who gives him gifts, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing. And then another parable. When you hear a story, you hear a parable, it makes you relate to things in a more understanding, in a more clear way. And the second story, he explained that if you look in reality, if you look at the world we're living in, there is different levels of creation. There is stones, and there's plants, and they're very different. And there's animals that are very different from plants. And there's human beings that are very different from animals. And then what's the next level? The next level, the next stage of creation is Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu being an example of the nation. Moshe Rabbeinu is not an individual. He is the representative of the Jewish nation. He's one person who maximized his potential as the nation, and he expresses who the nation is. And what did this person, Moshe Rabbeinu, do? He walked into fire. It says in the Torah, "Ha'ar kulo bo'er ba'esh." It was a volcano. He walked into a volcano. And he was there 40 days, 40 nights without eating, without sleeping. And he knew exactly when he was going to die. And he knew the future, and he knew the past. He gave us the history of the world, of the creation of the world, from the beginning of the first human being who we know about, that was moral, that was godly, and that's Adam HaRishon, the first man. And the king is shocked if such a thing exists. Moshe Rabbeinu. And remember, Moshe Rabbeinu individually was on a lower level than Avram Avinu. It says that when he came to Egypt and he told us, he said, God has sent me to take you out. And then Paro made it much more difficult. He starts crying. Why did you send me? You just made it worse. And Hashem says, Chaval al de'avdim velo mishkachim. Too bad I don't have Avram Avinu. Because Avram Avinu, I tell him to go and kill his son. And he goes without asking questions. And you see it gets difficult, and right away you broke. In other words, individually, he was less than Avram Avinu, but collectively, because now he represents the Jewish people, he's on a higher spiritual level collectively, not individually. And that's why he was given the name of God, Yud Kei Vav Kei, that Avram Avinu did not receive, because now you have the nation. And that was the purpose of Avram Avinu, was to create Vascha Goy Gadol, that will create a great nation out of you. So basically, the fifth level of creation is the Jewish nation. And from all of the things that we just spoke about, Moshe Rabbeinu, each one of them you could write a whole book, or you could ask questions about. What do you mean? He walked into fire? What do you mean he didn't eat and didn't drink? And when a person doesn't eat and doesn't drink, what happens? He becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. This person becomes beaming. He was so beaming that you couldn't even look at his face. You had to wear a mask because the material was so beaming. He was so full of strength and full of power. This is the proof of the next level of creation. So from all of the list of things that we talked about Moshe Rabbeinu, we knew exactly when he was going to die. And when he died, it was like he said, in a year from now, I'm going to die. So I gotta have certain things I want to give over. The whole book of Dvarim is Moshe Rabbeinu's final preparation, speech, farewell to the world, and the messages that he wanted to give over before he dies. And he knew exactly when, and it was all a preparation. So from all of the issues we mentioned about Moshe Rabbeinu, the king says, what do you mean? You have a calculation of when the world was, how old the world is, or when the world was created? And the rabbi says, not only do we have an exact calculation, okay? V'kama atem munim. Okay, I'm reading you to the words now. I'm reading 40. I'm jumping back because we're in the middle of it, but I'm jumping back to 44. Amar Kuzari, Gam ze tameh, I'm shocked. Im yesh etzlechem minyan barur b'riat olam, you have a clear distinction, a clear number, a time of when the world was created? And he gives him an answer that the king is blown away. Now, theoretically, this is like we're taking brackets. We're talking about something that's not really part of the topic, but it's very, very important. The methodology of this book, the messages, the building the foundations of faith are all very, very, nothing is a sidetrack. Nothing is a tangent. This is organized. This has a purpose. What we're going to talk about now of the years, how old is the world? And the rabbi says, yes, not only do we know, we have an exact calculation from the creation of the world, but there is no argument in any Jew from Hodu until Kush. In other words, from one side of the world to the other, you come to any Jew and you ask him, how old is the world? And they will tell you, 4,500 years old. That's when this book was written, when the argument actually happened. Today we say 5,784. Every Jew from every corner of the world all have the same calculation of the same time, the same years. And this brings us to a huge question. So again, and that is the methodology of the Kuzari. To prove the proof of understanding, again, we don't really need proof, but to explain the faith through historical course of events. God is revealed through history. That's the method of the Kuzari. The Rambam did it through science. Other people did it through... There's other ways to do it. But we're talking, God is revealed through history. That's how the Torah is written, a historical story. And that's that's the way to connect to the belief of God that we all have in us. Now, it's very important to know, every nation has a different talent. Our nation as Jews is faith. We believe in God. We don't need any proof. We don't need any facts. We don't need any... But, same way a person, it's our talent, it's our inheritance. Avram Avinu was the father of all believers. We believe. But the same way you could have a great talent for music. If you don't have a talent for music, then you can't learn music. It doesn't mean you don't need to develop it. It doesn't mean you don't need to practice. You don't need to learn. So we're learning faith. But remember, this is not something external to us. This is not something that, we're trying to be convinced. It's something we believe. And now we're convincing the convinced. I know it's true, but explain it to me more. Define it for me. Explain to me, what does it mean that I believe? Okay? So, and this brings us into this whole discussion of how old is the world? A. B. Was the world created? Or did the world always exist? And this is where we are. Why is it important to know if the world was created? Why is it important to know how many years the world is? Who cares? The Torah is supposed to tell us how to live our life. Why are this information, why is it important? So first of all, I want to bring something from the Ramban on Bereshit, says very important. I'm reading to you the words of the Ramban. Tzorech gadalu latchil Torah biBereshit bara Elohim. It's very important. There was a big need for the Torah to start off with Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, God created. And remember, we talked about it before. The Christians, the Muslim, all believe that God created the world. There was nothing, and then the world was created. The philosopher, which we're going to now go into and have a discussion with, we're talking about Aristotle and Plato, his teacher. The world always existed. There's no creation. The world always existed. And I'm going to read you into the Ramban. There's a great need to start with Bereshit. Ki hu shoresh ha'emunah. This is the root, the foundation of faith. U'she'eno ma'amin bazeh. Whoever doesn't believe this, that God created the world, v'choshev she'olam kadmon, and thinks that the world always existed, hu kofer ba'ikar ve'en lo Torah klal. That's a person that does not believe in the Torah. You don't have any Torah. You cannot learn anything because you're missing the basic foundation that God created the world. And we'll talk about different commentaries that explain you could still not believe that and you're still okay. But that's the Ramban. It says if you don't believe that God created the world, and that's why it starts out with, you have to know first, Bereshit bara Elohim, God created the world. There was nothing and God created the world. So that's really the subject that we're talking about. And so the king says to him, but wait. Will it not harm your faith? Now we're learning. We're at 60. 60. Does it harm your faith? Does it shake up your faith? That in India they believe that the world and buildings, and they can prove that the world is hundreds of thousands of years. Does it bother you? They have a different calculation. So the rabbi says, maybe it would shake me up if these people had any type of facts, proofs. This nation, what you're talking about, the Indian nation, they have nothing, no facts, no proof, no writings. They have nothing. They're full of different types of tales and imaginary worlds, and this is not even everything they have is completely nonsense. It's not even there's no science there. There's no wisdom there. There's really nothing to really deal with, have a discussion with. It's an imaginary world, and there's nothing of substance to even begin a debate or a discussion, or So the Kuzari says, okay, you know what? I agree with you. You're right. It's all full of tales and all kinds of things that have no facts. Amar kitanti alechem mufkeret ube'am she'enam maskimim. You're right. No, and nobody agrees on it. Nobody. It's like I'm saying. It's all different theories, and nothing is substantial. Nothing's intellectual. Okay, so I agree with that answer. Well said. Ma tomar b'filosofim vehem kasher What will you answer to the philosophers? And they researched it. And they have proofs, scientific proofs. And they agreed together that the world has always been, and the world always existed. And they're not talking 10,000 years or even 100,000 years. They're talking no beginning. The world has no beginning. Always existed. Right? Now, so here we have a lot of respect for the philosophers. They really tried hard. They used their intellect. They used their thinking, their research. These are serious people, and that's why the discussion now is going to go into a serious discussion. You want to bring a philosopher? Okay, a scientist. We'll have a serious discussion with them. We respect them because we respect people who really try to understand and to learn and to test and to come to a conclusion with using. That was the whole thing of philosophy, which did a great service to the world, coming from idol worshiping, which is there's no sechel, and it's just like let your emotions go wild, and there's no discussion, there's no thought, It came a philosopher and went to complete 180-degree other side, and everything has to be proven, everything has to be scientific, has to be thought of, has to be rational, has to make sense. Now, first of all, the king is wrong. It's not that all the philosophers came and said, they sat together and came up with understanding that the world has always existed. Aristotle says the world always existed. Plato, who was his teacher and was much greater than him, he says that the only material always existed, and that on the foundation of the material that existed, there was a new creation, and that's the world that we're in. So that's, it's not all this exactly the same, but that's the philosophy. Before we go into the answer of the rabbi to the philosopher, to the king's question on what the philosopher is saying, that the world always existed, I want to bring some ideas here from this rabbi named Rav Zuckerman. I used to be in his classes. Zecher Tzedek Yivacha. He was a incredible classes. By the way, I have here 4 books. This is my rabbi teaching Kuzari to children. So it's a 10-minute class. You can read this in 10 minutes. Then I have my rabbi of Shlomo Aviner. This is classes for kids. Then classes for people like me, an hour class each class. Then you have another rabbi named Rav Kalner, 2 hours a class. And then you have Rav Zuckerman, 4 hours each class, all teaching the same amount of text. So you have here going deeper into the same text. So obviously it's not small things that we're learning here. So I just wanted to mention one thing from Rav Zuckerman here about the age of the year and why do we count 6,000 years? We say the world's 5,784. Why do we connect the fact that, and now it's very important to know that when the answer that the rabbi gives, the first answer to the question, how old is the world? What's the answer? 4,500 שנה, ופירוטם מבואר מחיי אדם. This is with the years that we count. 5,784 is from Adam was born 5,007. But why do we connect that the world is only 6 days before that? Why do we connect that? There's proofs that there's facts that the world is billions of years old. There's proof that there's even there's caves that show that you can see in France where there's pictures of people chasing after animals that are 30,000 years old. There's definitely people before Adam that we know about. There are definitely people, and the Rav Kook brings a midrash that says that there were people before Adam. Why do we count from 5,784? Why do we count from Adam Arishon? And why do we connect the 6 days before that the world was created in 6 days, as if that's, part of the Adam, part of the creation of Adam? Because, first of all, how could you say that a day is 24 hours? A day is based on the sun and the moon, right? The sun circles around. That's how we know the time of a day. A day is based on, but the day was created. Sun and the moon were only created on the 4th day. That means that the calculation that you're counting on a day didn't exist till the 4th day. So the big question is, why do we connect the years, the 6,000, almost 6,000 years, and we connect that to the time of Adam Arishon? When there's proofs, they have machines, they have ways to you can check material, how old it is. They say it's billions of years old, or many years more than we say. And this is what the rabbi is trying to teach the Kuzari. You have to change your whole understanding of how you look at the world. The way we look at the world, we only start counting from the first person who was moral, who was godly, who had freedom of choice. What do we know about this first Adam Arishon? We know about him that he had a wife. So the people beforehand did not have a wife. The prehistoric man before Adam was what we call a human animal. The first story we know of a human being that is godly, that has freedom of choice, that can speak, that can think, is Adam Arishon. And therefore we said the Torah, the way the Rav Kook would spell it, right, is history. He would spell it this way. Without a tet, with a taf, because the Torah is Hester Yah, is the revelation, is that God is hidden, and the Torah comes to reveal God. What interests us is that this is what the king is trying to explain to the rabbi is trying to explain to the king. Who cares how old the world is? The world, it's like the architect has a thought. But when the house is built, for the reason, why did he want to build a house? He wanted to build a house so that somebody could be moral in the house. Someone could be righteous. Someone could be godly. That is Adam Arishon. We start counting. The world was given its purpose, its right to exist. Its functionality was created for Adam Arishon. Yes.
Would you say that you couldn't call the world completed until Adam was on earth?
Exactly. Until it says that the land didn't give fruits until Adam came and started praying and started praying for rain and started bringing this is the purpose. And therefore we connect the creation of the world to the person that was there. So whether it's exactly the numbers 5 billion, 6 billion, or 6 days, it's to teach you this message of that there is a connection between morality and the creation of the world. This is why the world was created for. And people don't understand this. People don't understand this, and that's why, and this is a very important thing, that the world has no right to exist without the person that reveals godliness in the world. So look at the world in the soul of the world. The purpose of the world is Adam, and Adam was godly, and that was what it was all about. So the age of the world is calculated based on the righteous people who are in it. And that's Adam Arishon, the first righteous person, and therefore, so stop looking at the world just in physical eyes. And this is a very big problem that we see in the world, that the scientists, they don't understand that there's a connection between morality and science. And therefore they went and they just gave the secrets to the whole world on the atomic bomb and began a race. What was the race? Who's going to be the first to invent an atomic bomb between Germany, Nazi Germany, and America? And thank God, only because of the Jews who ran away because of the Holocaust and they ran to America, that is the knowledge that was there to help America be first. Because we can't imagine what happens if the Torah was given, if the atomic bomb was given to the evil people, the Nazis. And that's why, and people don't have this understanding. Universities need to have a test, a moral test. You don't teach wisdom to a person who is corrupt morally. But there's no correlation, there's no connection. I'll just make it even stronger, this idea. A big question people have is, Paro had a dream. The king of Egypt has a dream. And I'm asking you a question. It's so hard for you to understand that you have these fat cows and these thin cows, 7 and 7, and the thin cows eat the fat cows. You can't, they need only Yosef has to come up with the answer to the dream. You don't know the cows is finance. You don't know that 7 cows eat 7 cows, that now there isn't finance. I had cows, I had wealth, I had plenty, and now it's gone. Why do you need Yosef to come and give the interpretation? And it says, only Yosef, who is a Nar Ivri. What does it mean, Ivri? Come from Ever, who spoke Ivrit. But Ivri means the other side of the river. Only somebody who comes from the other side of the river, where they speak a different language, could come and give us the answer. You know what the answer is? Why they couldn't come up with the answer? Because in Paro's dream, if you read the words, what does the Torah say? How does the Torah call fat cows and thin cows? Tovot mar'eh, the fat cows. Veraot basar, bad skin, bad meat. So suddenly, and the Egyptians could not connect these two things. How could you connect good and bad morality with good and bad morality with finance? These two worlds, morality and finance, they're two separate, complete worlds. There's no way in any reality could these two concepts coexist in one reality. And that's because the world does not understand the connection between morality and creation and finance. And this is the message of the Jewish people. God is one. God is one means the way you act in your business and the way you act in your personal life, it's all connected. It's all one entity. And you need to act that way. And that's what we're trying to tell you, that the world, the existence of the world was created when Adam was created 5,784 years ago. And that's the first person who had freedom of choice, who was godly, who was refined, who had a one woman, bekviut ubeatzilut ruach, one woman with, how do you say, kviut, that he was with her and only her, and in a godly way, an exalted way, in a refined way. What we call, unfortunately, it's sick how people take the most beautiful words and defy them. They have the places that they have, where they take advantage of women, are called gentlemen's club. That's gentle. That's a gentle person who looks at a woman as a piece of meat, who looks at a woman as an object. That's a gentle person. That's a violent person. And this is what the Torah, this is what the message, why it's so important to understand that everything begins from the revelation of God, the godliness in the world, and that's where it all begins, and that's what the message that you need to first understand is this unity of God is one, and everything is connected. And the science, I know, yes, the scientists look at the world just on material, and the material aspect. And we say, no, you must look at the world in its spiritual aspect. You must first, also there's a book called Mesirat Yesharim, Path of the Just, if anyone ever heard of this book. And the first chapter of the book, he says we can't learn anything until we first explain something. This concept of Olam Haba, the next world. Unless you could learn this understand this foundation of, there's something called Olam Haba. There's something called a spiritual world that you can't grasp or understand with your physical senses, but it's more real. It's eternal. It's more, how do you say, it exists. And even though I can't grasp it with my physical senses, but it exists, and it's more eternal, and it's more important than anything else you could see in this world. Once you understand that, we can take the next steps. And that's the same thing here. What the rabbi is doing with the king is helping him first understand foundations. Foundation number one, we said, is that the world is we only count from the years of the first godly creation, the first tzaddik, the holy person that revealed God in his essence. He revealed God in his actions. He sinned, he fell, he made a mistake. It's okay. But the main thing is, this is the creation. This is the first person that has freedom of choice, first person who has a refined and a holy relationship with one woman, with a wife that is Chava. And this is what it's about. So he says, okay, so now tell me, what do you answer to the philosophers who say material always existed? And what does that mean, material always existed? The physical is more powerful than the spiritual. You can't go above the material. The material is there, it's always been there, it's before you, it's before the creation, it's even more powerful than God himself, because it's before God even was involved.
What material?
Physical material. Everything, material. Again, we said the argument between Aristotle and Plato is that Plato says the material was just raw material, and then there was a creation that kind of made it into into the world we see it. But the material was always there. Physical material has always existed.
You're saying the philosophers.
Philosophers say their argument, and they say the world always existed. And you could say God always existed also, but they're parallel tracks. They don't really connect with each other. God is way beyond, above. He's not involved. And the world always existed. So this is a very important understanding of that we say God created the world. Something from nothing. Right? We are not... This is the problem of Christianity, that God became a man. We are not creators. We can build things, we can take things, but we're not creators. We are created, and God is the creator. And it's very important to know the distinction between who I am and who He is, right? So what do you answer to the? What do you answer to this question of the philosophers that say the world is always existed? So the rabbi says, okay, I accept your answer to the Indians, but what's your answer to these people that they all agreed on the same thing, and they all said the world has no beginning and no purpose? If you created something, you want it to obviously be something, right? If I'm an architect and I built it and I created it, what did you create it for? So if there's no beginning, there's also no purpose. And one of the revelations we had when we were leaving Egypt, it says we saw the Yad HaChazaka and a Zroa Netuya. We had two revelations. We saw the strong hand, and we saw the outstretched arm. What does that mean? We saw the strong hand and the outstretched arm. Hazroa Netuya. We saw the strong hand, and we saw that God created the world. It was clear to us God created the world, because He can now decide what He wants to do with the world. But we also saw the outstretched arm. When I put a piece of wood here and I want to now cut it into two, I lift my arm up in order to now bring my arm down with the axe and break the wood into two. The outstretched arm, we saw that God not only created the world, but He has a purpose for the world, and he wants the world to reach its final destination. And that's what we're saying here. If there's no creation, then there's also no purpose. There's no purpose for the creation. If there's a creator who created it and has a purpose for it. So what is the answer that the rabbi is going to give? 63. Amar HaChaver. הפילוסופים אין להאשים אותם מפני שהם עם שלא נחלו חוכמה ולא תורה מפני שהם יוונים. The answer now is going to be again historic. Let me give you a small lesson, says the rabbi, in history. מפני יוון ובני יפת השוכנים בצפון. You can't blame Aristotle for not knowing the truth. Why? Because Yavan, the Greeks, Yavan is Greek, right? Yes. The Greeks, they were the descendants of Yefet. So we know Noach had 3 children, Shem, Ham, and Yefet. Shem was the one who inherited the wisdom. Ham inherited the, barbaric, with barbarism. And Yefet inherited the aesthetics. The word Yavan in Hebrew is the same letters. So Yavan, okay, Yud, Vav, Nun, is the same letters as where you have Nun, there's Noi, which is beauty. He's like, you have to understand the historical context, and you can't blame Aristotle for not knowing the answer. The Greeks, their whole thing was aesthetics, was beauty. They were amazing at art, at poetry, at plays and acting and all kinds of things that had to do with art. And they did not get the inheritance. The one who was given over the wisdom, the knowledge, was Shem. He inherited that from Noach. But what happened? Here's the historical story. The Greeks conquered Persia, and they became the superpower. And what happens was, and they said, we can't be the superpower unless we also bring to the world wisdom. So right away they gathered, we have to build a university. We can't be considered like a real nation if we don't have also wisdom. We have to have answers for everything. We have to have answers for everything. So they took a very smart man, Aristotle, that we have respect for and his knowledge. Chokhmah bagoyim b'tamin, wisdom in the nations. Rambam says you need to respect and to believe, listen to what they're saying. And they said you have to give answers to everything. But how could you pop into somewhere? And if you look, once they were no longer the superpower, gone, no wisdom. There was no wisdom before them, before Aristotle, before the Greeks were in power, and there's no wisdom after. It was what we call a one-hit wonder. They had this amazing philosopher who was incredible, but he was not what we call, he was not, what's the word? He didn't behave in a intellectual, honest way, because he should not have given answers to everything. You don't have answers for everything. You don't know everything. Ask people before you. Find out. Bring in other people. And don't come and think, this is pride, to think you have answers for everything, about everything, and you have what to say. Okay? And therefore, what happened? And he gave answers about the creation of the world that he has no understanding about. And he has no facts about, and it's not true. And the king says, wait. You're telling me right now, you're blowing me off. You're not answering the question. You're telling me I can't believe him because he just came out of nowhere. He didn't look at what came before him. He didn't, and there's nothing came at him after. And therefore, he's saying something that he's bringing proof. He's bringing knowledge. And you're just blowing him off because he doesn't come from the nation that was the nation of wisdom, that was given that inheritance. If he said something true, then accept it, right? He's not saying things that have just blowing it out of his off his head. He thought he did a scientific clarification. He's proven. And the king says no. He didn't have prophecy. The only way to know that the world is created is prophecy. Either you were there, or you had someone who was there, or prophecy. And he doesn't have that. They don't have prophets. They have no lineage. They have no tradition of prophecy. And therefore, the question of the creation of the world is not a question of science. It's not a question of knowledge. It's a question of morality. It's a question of godly. It's a question of, and this was given by prophecy, and it's the only way to know. And since they are scientists, and the only thing they could do, what does a science do? Science tells you what is the material made of. They can't tell you why there's gravity, but just explain the world. So if they say the world didn't exist, they have no job. They have to explain something based on the facts. They need material to explain why it works that way. They don't know why it works, but how it works. They just explain how it works. And the Torah, the subject of the Torah, is a question of the moral obligation of the material. Like, in other words, the philosopher can tell you that the cow is made of these, what it's made of, but the moral responsibility of the cow owner, that's what the Torah is coming to tell you. So he's trying to say there's no argument between science and Torah. They're talking about two separate things. Same way there's no argument between music and physics. They're talking different things, different worlds. But still, the king says, I don't understand. Why are you blowing me off? If he's bringing proofs, he brought proofs. So why are you pushing me off saying he never got prophecy? He never got prophecy, so everything he's saying is wrong. Right? Ma'chaver, you're right. I'll give you, I'll accept your criticism. I think that information I just told you is very important to understand where does the wisdom come from. But you want to talk, you want me to answer you? So let me really explain it to you. Miprei shehitriach sichlo, now we're in 65. Yes, מפני שהטריח את שכלו מחשבתו בעבור שלא הייתה בידו קבלה ממי שיאמין בהגדתו וחשב בחטא העולם עד סופו. He had no, Aristotle, he couldn't digest that the world was created something from nothing. As we say, there was nothing, and then suddenly there was something. He couldn't digest that. Right? So therefore he came to the conclusion that the world always existed. Right? But he was torn. He was thinking, okay, wait. I can't understand how the world was really created from nothing. But I also can't really explain how the world always existed. So he was like sort of torn between, like, maybe the world always existed, maybe the world was created from nothing. And he decided, I'm making a decision. Right? The world always existed. He should have said, I don't know. It could be that it was always created. It could be that it was always existed, and I don't know. Right? Because obviously, so these were, it was very hard. And ולא רצה לשאול מניין שני מי שהיה לפניו. Why don't you ask the people before you? Go to the people before you. You're not the first person that existed. You're a scientist. Make a round table. Call in different thinkers, different intellectuals, different scientists, philosophers. אילו היה במועד שכחה מקובלת מפורסמת, אינו יכול לדחות אותם. אם תעשה בקשב, חזיק חידוש עם קשייה, right? And therefore, that was not what's called intellectual integrity. He was not integral in this level where he. So the king says, "Well, is there really?" So now the king asks, "V'chiyesh mofet achra basechel?" In other words, is it really something that can be decided to hear or to hear? Like that question is a very deep, difficult question. Can it be decided really? Right? And obviously, he's saying no. It's something that no, it must be אמר החבר, ומאין לנו מופת בשאלה הזאת חלילה על אש תבוא התורה במה שידחה ראיה מופת. He said, and what if he really does have proof? What if he has proof? וכי יש מופת הכרעה שתתפשט בסרט? Could it be? He says he must have a proof. Aristotle must have proof. And he says, let me explain to you something. First of all, this is the rabbi. There will never be a situation that the Torah will contradict things that are proven, that you can see with your eye. It says one thing, the Torah will say, no, it's not, it's something else. The Torah will never go ahead and listor and say that it's wrong, that it's not true, something that you can see in reality. It's a very important thing. It's a very important thing what we're talking about here, because remember we mentioned what in sense, this common sense. I see something. What are you telling me? It never happened. Don't tell. If I'm proving to you something, you're not going to tell me it's not true. So he says the Torah will never destroy, will never come against something that is facts, that is proof. What your eyes can see. Right? In other words, there's nothing that says in the Torah that your eyes will tell you something the opposite, and it is not true. The Torah is not against what we call common sense, against the sechel, against the intellect, against thought, and against reality. And now he's going to ask a big question. Before we go to that question, I just want to say, remember what we talked about, the Christianity. The Christian philosophy comes and says, you want to believe in me? You must sacrifice your common sense for God. A woman gave birth without a husband. A man became God. A prophet became God. And you have to turn off your brain, turn off your common sense, and believe something that does not exist. So the next question we have, well, what about miracles? What about miracles? Tavo Torah, and now this is an important thing. Where is the place for miracles? Miracles are the changing nature. I can't understand that. The reason, so this is what he says. Even miracles are not there to destroy nature. It's like you have a nation and they have rules, laws. And then there is laws for a time of emergency. There are different laws. They're different, but they don't come to destroy. When a scientist is being a scientist, you have to act like there are no miracles. You don't believe in miracles. Because your job is to look at the reality and not think that miracles, or a doctor, says that just, pray for a miracle. That's not, you don't go to that doctor. You do everything you can as if there is no miracles. That's the only way to advance science. So the Torah, the aspect that we have, the reality that we have with miracles, are not there to destroy the reality. They're just there for one reason. Right? הכתבות תורה מנפלאות ושנות מנהגים מבראת דברים או להפך דבר אחר להורות על חוכמת הבורא או יכולת לעשות מה שחפץ בעת שחפץ. The reason we have miracles are just there to show that God can if he wants to. That God is the master of the world, the creator of the world. And if he wants to split the sea, and if he wants to bring back bring back the dead, if he wants to do everything that you can understand, it's a reality. It has its order. The miracles are very important, but they're not there. They're not there to say that the whole world doesn't exist, that nature doesn't exist, that the laws of nature don't exist, that the facts of the ground are not reality. It doesn't come to destroy reality. That's why it's so important that we live our life without miracles. Right? We say, Lo somchim ala nes, we don't rely on miracles, Smechim al hanes. We're happy when there's miracles because it makes a certain revelation. The miracles don't come to destroy the facts, to destroy the world. God wants the world to run the way it is, but there's a place for miracles. Miracles are very important. We also know Amalek, when it heard there was miracles, it right away came to fight us because it said, no, we can't have miracles. Because miracles means that God basically opens the veil and says, hello, I'm here. Every once in a while, behind the veil, that the blind nature suddenly, like right today, you go, a tzaddik goes and he slips on a banana and falls. And an evil person also falls. Like, it's blind. Nature's blind. But once in a while, nature opens its eyes. Once in a while, God comes out from behind and says, no. And that's what we see in the Torah. If you go in my ways, you'll have food, you'll have everything, to remind us that there's the connection between the moral, the physical, are so important. So that's basically for today. We'll end here. And we'll continue. And then it goes back to, he says, okay, I accept, now we're going back to the original question. Next week, hopefully, we'll go back to the original question. In other words, I was convinced till now, the king says. You convinced me till now, but I still want to go back to the question. How could it be that the creator of the world, like the philosopher says, is too beyond us, it's too bigger than us, it's too much greater than us, communicates with us, cares about what we do? Now we're going back to the original question. Once we've had a detour and we've had a course of understanding certain foundations, certain messages that we can't keep moving on without knowing that. The connection of the creation of the world and our moral actions and the creation of the world, how they are connected, how they are united, how God is one, and the purpose of creation was freedom of choice. Now we can come back to the question of how could it be that God communicates, God, the creator of the world, the king of all kings, communicates with human beings? That's next week.